Well, I think we're ready to get started. Our next speaker is Ron Jakubowski from Aurora Co-Op. Going to talk about nitrogen management, and go ahead, Ron.
Obviously I'm with Aurora Co-Op. I've been with the co-op for about 10 months now, but I've been down here in the valley for about 18 and a half years now. I'm from Wood River. Originally, I'm from O'Neill. That's where I grew up, so I'm very familiar with nitrogen efficiency and the use of it with all the sandy pivots up there, and it's a real big deal. But today, nitrogen efficiency, nitrogen is the biggest input we put out there most of the time. And so it's important that we manage it right, that we understand it, and we put it out there when the crop needs it, and we protect it if there's any chance that we have that ability to lose it. So it's good to understand nitrogen, and at the end of the day, we want to get the biggest bang out of the buck with nitrogen. So first off, when someone comes to me and they want to know, what's the best way to put on my nitrogen, first thing I want to know is, well, what kind of ground you got? Okay, so I'm going to want to see your soil results. Okay, and one of the first things I look at is the CEC of that soil. And that's just going to tell me the holding capacity of that soil, how much nitrogen it can hold. Of course, on sands right here, of course, our CECs are 0 to 10. A lot of sands I'm used to are 5 and below. That's not going to hold much nitrogen, right? So, especially the nitrate form. So we got to make sure that we're spoon feeding that crop as it grows. If I see some results and we get around these fine loams, which I think a lot of our CECs around here, probably around that 15, a lot of silt loams that we have. Of course, that's just going to hold a lot more nitrogen. So that gives us more of an ability maybe to, if labor might be an issue, maybe we could put a little bit on earlier. But if we do that, we need to make sure that we know that we need to probably protect that nitrogen if we do put it out there earlier, before the crop's growing. Okay? So knowing what the soil can hold is a big deal when making any kind of nutrient recommendation. And another thing, I guess, you guys have probably seen this before. It's the nitrogen cycle. There's a million different graphs that show the nitrogen cycle, but we got to refresh ourselves every once in a while. How it works, what's actually going on when I put my fertilizer in the soil, and with the products that we use. I'm just going to start here on the left side. Say urea. What happens to urea when we just put it on the ground and we don't have a treatment on it? Well, if the conditions are dry and there's a lot of residue out there, there's a pretty big potential that we can lose a lot of that nitrogen from volatilization. And all it does is it turns into ammonia gas, and it's gone. That can happen pretty fast over a week's period if the conditions are right. Now, if we're going to try to snuff that out so it doesn't happen, that's where we're either going to work it in after application, we water it in, that's another option, or you make sure it's treated, so it's not going to dissipate to the atmosphere. Now, the other thing, I guess, or the big thing that we need to protect is the ammonia part of nitrogen. So, I guess when we put anhydrous on, for example, it's NH3, but as soon as we put it in the soil, it hydrolyzes. So it combines with water, and it turns to NH4, which is ammonium. Okay? So ammonium it can still be used by a plant, but it's got a positive charge. So it's going to stick to the soil. All right? So the big thing here, since it sticks, is let's put nitrification inhibitors so it stays in that form a lot longer. And the lot longer it stays in that form, it just spreads that risk out to where that crop can feed on it when it needs it. Okay? So eventually the microbes, they're going to break down the nitrification inhibitor, and that ammonia is going to convert over to nitrate. And that's where we have issues, of course, with leaching if we got too much water, and then we got, denitrification if we got ground that's saturated. okay? So, this is just a good overview of, what goes on with the nitrogen cycle and the products that we put on. So we have to take this into account when we're doing any of our planning. So, it's good to be aware of our watering. Nitrogen, once it's in the nitrate form, it moves fast. Just as fast as that water moves when we apply it out there. So, one thing that I see a lot of is just furrow irrigation or flood irrigation here. If the nitrogen, say the nitrogen is applied, might be some gas was put down the center here, maybe some UAN was put down, close to the plant, but we're putting a lot of water in this zone right here. And if that nitrogen's not protected, where's it going to go? It's going to leach down beyond where the roots can get to it. Okay, so in these situations, I always stress, if you're going to do a side dress application or a pre-plant, make sure you get something out there to protect it, because you're going to be putting a lot of water out there. So we don't want to lose it, because nitrogen's a big investment. Okay. So yeah, use stabilizers in the flood irrigation part. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it before, but I don't know how many flood irrigators are out there, but usually you'll see maybe 20 or 30 yards where you'll get nitrogen flaring right at the beginning of the field where all this water is starting to flow in, and then it kind of goes away over time. So, but anyway, just keep that in mind with furrow irrigation. Checking water patterns and leave room for Mother Nature. And I guess what I mean by that is, I'm not going to knock drops. I think drops are good, but sometimes drops, they get down the canopy a little bit, and if they're not set right, weird things happen. A lot of that water gets basically funneled in a concentrated area. Instead of going out further, it gets concentrated down. If that ground is a lighter, it has more sand in it, you're going to have more water volume going down, right below that drop, or that drop nozzle, compared to, how we want it, is to evenly spread out. I've seen that quite a bit on some ground where that happens. And so we're kind of just doing a disservice of spreading that water out appropriately. So just keep that in mind. If you got any drops, make sure they're all serviced right. Last year, everyone's irrigating pretty hard, so I get it sometimes, that it's hard to get to that stuff. So moisture probes, that's another important part of monitoring your water and how it's moving. It's fun if you watch after a rain event or an irrigation event, you can see that water going down your graph, and that's just telling you, well, that's where the nitrogen is going too. So if you got nitrogen down there, it's going to be there, right there with the water. So I always kind of keep that in mind. I tie the two together. Wherever that water goes, nitrogen goes with it. So, the next thing is the nitrogen sources that we protect. And I just put the big three up here. I know there's a few more that are available, but the big three are anhydrous ammonia. And I don't know if you guys ever seen anhydrous ammonia, like when it's not all white and vapory, but it looks like water. I took this behind a looking glass, so it's behind its cage. So it looks just like water behind there. So it kind of has a little oily appearance too, but that's anhydrous right there. Of course, we got our urea, our fluffy white urea, and then we have our UAN products, urea ammonium nitrate. So do you know how we get urea ammonium nitrate? You know how they make it? It's half ammonium nitrate and half urea. And they just warm those two fertilizers up and they combine them together, and that makes our UAN, urea ammonium nitrate. Okay? And in that urea ammonium nitrate, so half of it is urea, okay? Half of it, 25% of that UAN is ammonium, which is the NH4, it's not going to leach. And then another 25% of that UAN is nitrate, which the plant can use. Okay? So we're trying to protect at least 75% of that UAN, because 25% is already nitrate. That's good. The plant's going to use that when we put it out there. But we're going to try to protect that 75%. What we're going to do is these are our products that we have. You know, there's a lot of companies that have their own products too, and they do a lot of the similar things. But we use InShield and we use Instat. InShield here is a urease inhibitor. And basically all that's doing is, you know, the microbes that we have out in the soil, they produce an enzyme, urease, and it converts the nitrogen to ammonia gas, okay? So this InShield is basically keeping that urease from doing that, okay? Instat is below ground. Instat is below ground, and that's it's used with UAN, and basically that's keeping the ammonium form from converting to the nitrate. Okay, so Inserv, I'm sure a lot of you guys might be familiar with Inserv. That's an old staple that's been around for a long time. Again, that's mixed with anhydrous, and what it does is it basically keeps the microbes, the bacteria, from converting that ammonium into nitrate. Okay, so those are good products. You know, if I was, these guys they're basically all insurance policies, because the nitrogen moves so fast, it converts so fast, and it moves so fast that, you know, these guys up here are extremely important, basically tools in your toolbox to keep your investment in your field and to get it to the crop when it needs it. Okay. So, you know, the next thing we need to know is, you know, or be aware of is, when is the nitrogen used? Okay, and this is just the seasonal nitrogen uptake of a corn crop here. And this goes all the way up to 250 pounds of N, so it's a pretty good charge. But I guess what I wanted to point out here is, you know, of course when that plant's young, it's not using a lot of nitrogen per day. But as we get up to about V10, you know, that crop gets into that rapid growth stage, and it's starting to really eat up a lot of nutrient per day. You know, in this case, we're talking just nitrogen a day, but it's eating up a lot. Okay, and then as we get into the grain field period, you know, 60% of that nitrogen that we put out there during the grain field, it goes into the ear. Okay, so there's a lot of nitrogen. The big point here is there's a lot of nitrogen used from basically that middle, late June all the way in through August. Okay, so that's a great time when we put our nitrogen products out there. Okay, we don't want to, I guess the big thing is we don't want to put a whole bunch over here. Say this is, you know, during plant time over here. I'm just kind of imaginarily extending this chart out. Putting a whole bunch over here when the crop's going to use over here it runs risk, and that's why protecting that nitrogen source again is important. Okay. Also, you know, I guess thinking about where the roots are, that's another important thing. You know, if we're putting any product on, whether it's strip till or ammonia or something, you know, we're putting that 6 to 7 inches deep. Okay, so those plants ain't going to get to it until, you know, if we plant end of April, it might be the end of about V4, V5. It's just rain dependent, but it might be the end of May, 1st of June before those plants really start getting into those nitrogen bands. And I think probably all of you guys have seen it before, where you see all this yellow, nice green kind of striping going through the field where someone put on some nitrogen. You know, that's what's going on, is those roots there's some roots finally getting to those bands, but that light yellow-green stuff, there's already yield problems going on there. We're already getting dinged right there. So know where those roots are. Of course, closer we can get these nitrogen products to the roots, you know, the better off we are. So sometimes those nitrification inhibitors and urease inhibitors, those things are going to help those products, again, stay in place so the crop can use it. Probably, you know, the biggest thing we can do is spread out our risk. Okay, so spreading out our in applications. You know, if we start with, you know, if we got some heavy ground, starting with a pre-plant application. Say you want to put on, if it's heavy ground, say you want to put half your nitrogen on before plant time. It's a great time. Again, make sure you get some stabilizer in there. After that, say we want to get some in our planter. I mean, I'm a pretty big advocate. I come from sand ground, and there ain't too many guys that run pop-up. I mean, they might have pop-up, but they're also going to have a starter, a high volume starter, maybe up to 200 pounds of a product, which might be about 30, 40 pounds of end they're applying with their like 2x2 starter. So that's in sand ground. But no matter what, it's important to have nitrogen up front. These are just bandits, but it's important to have nitrogen close to that seed when it comes up. Okay, and we stabilize it, and we recommend stabilizing it. So it's going to stay there, and that plant's going to have it when it needs it. Then we kind of, we have weed and feed situations where we're out there, putting a herbicide down and spraying some weeds. We got a lot of residue out there, and the residue is like a sponge. It soaks up that nitrogen. Of course, we got our urease enzyme out there. It's going to want to convert this UAN we're putting out there. So that's where that in-shield comes into place. It's protecting that nitrogen source again from volatilizing. Okay. Side dressing, that's another spot where maybe that's where half of your nitrogen can go on right there. Whatever your program entails, but Y drops become very popular. Some guys have made up their own Y drops, which is great. Whatever works for you. But we're getting this nitrogen right there where those roots need it. I mean, that's a big deal. I've seen a lot of cases where the nitrogen goes right in between the plants, and sometimes it takes a while for the plants to get to it. You want these plants to get to it as soon as they can, so you're not getting any kind of yield hits. Because sometimes that kernel development, rows around, that's that V3, V4 time period. So you got to have the nitrogen up front, and so you don't ding that yield at that special time. So yeah, Y drops, and then if you guys got pivots, that's a great way to put on your nitrogen. That's I know where I'm from. Like I said, O'Neill up there, sandy country. I mean, that's most of the nitrogen is put on through pivots. There might be 5, 6 different applications. So, but also with those pivot applications, you can put that instat in there. It's going to again keep that. It's going to keep 75% of that UAN in a stable form a lot longer. So this just kind of talking about the in-shield, the urease inhibitor, and what it does. It protects for up to about 14 days. And so hopefully their tillage happens or rainfall happens in between them to get that in. So say you're putting some urea out there or UAN, that's what the in-shield does, is protect it from converting. Allows the crop to get to closer to its genetic potential. That's a big deal. I mean, we're putting some very expensive seed in the ground, and we want to get the most out of it. And nitrogen can be a big limiting factor in that. So protecting that nitrogen again with these products can be a huge benefit, when harvest comes around. Of course, this can be done with a lot of different applications: side grass, top grass, broadcast, dribble. Instat was the other one I was talking about. This one was below ground protection. The words are kind of small there, but basically, again, we're keeping that ammonium in that form. And that's what this is doing. It's keeping the bacteria in the soil from converting that ammonium to nitrate again. Okay. We've done some trials. One thing about our products is we have a lot of research behind them. We have a lot of data that shows they work. We're not going to sell some that doesn't work. And so we have a lot of data that shows that running this stuff, we get pretty big yield benefits from it. This one right here is 17 bushel, 15, 18, 17. So it really shines. And every year is going to be different. If we get a real wet season, these products really shine. But if we have a real dry season, we might not see as much benefit. But if I had to roll the dice, I would always protect my investment rather than, I guess, leave it in God's hands. So I guess in summary, it's always about knowing your soils, you know, choose your best nitrogen sources that fit your operation. You know, protect that nitrogen as much as you can. You know, I'm not saying you protect every single bit of nitrogen you put out there, but maybe concentrate on, you know, the earlier applied stuff. Maybe it's a better bet to protect that stuff. The later applied stuff, when that crop is, you know, really growing, you know, maybe you don't have to put a stabilizer on. So incorporate into your operations. I mean, is at least with half of your nitrogen somewhere in there to get the best bang out of that nitrogen source. You know, monitor your irrigation. Make sure you're not over applying water. You know, that's what the moisture probes are nice for. I always like to leave room for Mother Nature. I don't. I guess in the sandy ground, we usually put on a 1/2 inch per revolution, and that works well with heavy ground too. And that always, when you're only putting a 1/2 inch on, if Mother Nature comes and dumps a 2-inch rain on you, that's just that much more room for you to save that. So, and then of course, like I said, there, split up your nitrogen. I put this picture in here just to kind of give a summary of, you know, we got it pretty good. I mean, I don't think this is probably the most efficient way to spread your nitrogen, but they do this. I mean, this is third world stuff. I mean, this is how they still spread their nitrogen. And he's probably get some rice that he's spreading on. I mean, I don't think his pattern's too good there, but that's how the nitrogen, a lot of nitrogen is spread across the world. So we do pretty good. We do pretty good with what we got here. That's all I had. You guys got any questions?
Hey,
Answer
Ron,
me.
what cost-wise, what are you talking about with inhibitors?
Yeah, so
Roughly.
like the insert, usually it's usually about 1 quart per acre. The question was what the costs are for these inhibitors and these stabilizers. And insert is usually around that $9-10 an acre. The instat and the in-shield are very rate dependent as far as what you're putting on. So like instat, for example, which is the below ground protection, you're looking at around, if you're putting, say, like a 20-gallon radon of 32 or something, you're looking about that $9 an acre. I think in-shield is pretty close to that too. So, but when you do the math about how much you can lose, it actually pays for itself, and you actually get a return on it over time. So.